Hi, my name is Keith Cooper, and in this video I'm going to look at something called the print quality triangle, suitably pithy term for basically people wanting things on the cheap. Now, I get asked an awful lot about cheap printers, cheap paper, cheap inks, basically cheap. The problem is that much like the old engineering adage, better, faster, cheaper, pick two, to indicate that you have to pay for quality or speed. In printing, you have a choice of print costs, print quality, and printer costs. Now, printer cost, I'll include ink, but I would say basically if you're choosing between print cost, quality, and printer cost, once again, it's pick two of those. What do I actually mean by what do you pick there? Well, printers in general, and all of these are in general because there are exceptions to most things. Some printers are better, some printers are more expensive, some printers give you more ink but charge less per ink, per unit amount of ink. So printers in general, more expensive printers will give you better quality prints and will be cheaper to run in terms of ink costs. So the one there is you buy a more expensive printer. What about cheap ink in that? Well, I get a lot of people ask about third-party inks. I would never personally use third-party inks because first of all, it would break all the profiles that I've made for a printer. Now, I put quite a lot of effort into making printer profiles, as do the companies that supply printer profiles, whether they supply it with papers they sell or the actual makers. They put quite a bit of effort in that. Those profiles are effectively broken. Now, if you go, well, I don't really mind that, then obviously you were never bothered about quality in the first place. There are some other issues of inks. You may need to flush the original system. You may need to do quite a bit of work on it, and also it's going to affect your warranty. Now, there are fans of third-party inks, and there are some specialist inks which I might consider using for specialist printer, but for an ordinary colour black and white printing, I would not choose third-party inks. The costs, the ongoing costs of them are more, and the savings that you get with bulk ink systems, well, once again, that's fine. If you want those savings that you get from bulk ink systems, that says from the print quality triangle of print cost, quality, printer cost, that you've basically said, well, quality, yeah, well, we can get around that. I'm more interested in cheapness. I'm not going to actually say that people who want cheap inks are cheap by nature, but draw your own conclusions. Now, it doesn't mean it's wrong. If they suit you, then by all means go for it. But from the point of view I come at, which is looking at print quality, I understand that print quality is going to cost me something, whether that's in paper, whether that's in ink costs. What about cheap papers? Well, here there's a good range of papers. Now, there are the manufacturers, so Canon papers, Epson papers. Then there are what I call the big brand papers. Hahnemuhle springs to mind. Some people would include the likes of Ilford in that, although I tend to think more of companies like Canson when I'm thinking of the high-end paper makers. And then there are your local paper suppliers, fine art papers, and there are several of them in the UK. I've pointed out several of them in my reviews and that, who supply high quality papers. Now, those papers tend to be cheaper than the expensive branded ones. Having looked at lots of these papers, I'm pretty much convinced that you're paying for the name in many papers. Now, if you like the paper and it gives you results you like and you're happy with paying for it, then by all means go ahead with it. But in terms of paper costs, there are cheaper papers, and here in the UK there are suppliers who will create custom profiles for you. So that gets you paper. Now you have to buy some paper off them to get the profiles. Other suppliers will actually provide profiles for many printers, not the cheaper printers, because it's not worth their while. People who buy cheaper printers are generally not interested in the quality of custom ICC profiles. If they are, they should have got a better printer. That's the view of the people selling paper. They're looking at the market. They know that there is a market for printers with no significant colour management, that people are just printing out snaps on, and they wouldn't know what a printer profile was if it fell on them. They're quite happy with that. Know the market you're selling to if you're going to have a range of products. But as I said, I'm looking at this coming at a point of view of printer quality. I want good looking prints. I don't want dodgy looking prints with poor ink on them. Now, here's a problem with, there is cheaper papers. So I've tested high quality papers from people in the UK like Permajet, Photospeed, and my local supplier Paper Spectrum. Now, those are really nice papers. In fact, you have to take note of the fact that Canon and Epson don't make their own papers. So they're getting papers made for them. So when in a review I point to a paper like this roll over here, this is an Innova one that I'm testing, really nice paper, and say that this is very similar to a well-known brand paper, you can take very similar quite often as sort of code for the people whose label appears on the paper. It's actually made by someone else. Now, a lot of the information of that I can't really pass on because it's commercially sensitive. But what I would say is, don't think that just because you're buying paper from a company that sells papers, as I say, the ones I mentioned here, people like Red River in the States, just because you're buying paper from them with their own brand on it doesn't mean that that's not paper of very similar quality to that you would get, but perhaps might have Epson printed on the back or Canon. So, that's paper quality is an area where there's some latitude. One issue I have looked at is the problem of cheap paper on cards. If you want to print cards, get card that is meant for inkjet use. I get a steady stream of people saying, I've bought such and such £200 card stock. That's terms that are used over in the US. Nobody uses that here anymore, but I know what they mean for these sort of things. I bought some of this card stock and it doesn't print very well. Well, no surprise there. It's not been coated for inkjet paper. If you've ever accidentally put a print the wrong way, sheet of paper the wrong way around into a paper, you will notice that either the ink doesn't dry or the ink runs or it doesn't. The wrong side of the paper is because the coating is what accepts the ink. And this is an example of a card, perfectly good card. It's creased, ready to fold, and the picture looks dreadful. Now, there's no amount of colour management, tweaking, changing the printer settings, the driver settings, which will get round the fact that rubbish card makes for rubbish prints. There is only so much your adjustment can allow for. Now, the adjustments are for getting the best results out of something, not for rescuing something like this. I don't know which card this was, but this is a card that if it were used commercially for commercial printing would probably produce really nice looking cards. But put them through an inkjet printer and you get rubbish. And that is false economy, false cheapness. Somebody who's just bought a pile of card because it was cheap, and I'm going to say that they were probably looking to sell these cards, and the reason they were looking for cheap card is because they wanted to make some money from it, and that they looked at expensive card, proper card for it, and thought, I can't make money on that. Well, take that as a big hint that your business model is defective in other ways. Just because you produce stuff, and I've got loads of things looking at the, selling prints, producing cards, all kinds of aspects of the business side of printing as well, which I won't go into here. But suffice to say, you need a solid business model to make a profit. If I buy expensive card and it goes past the ceiling price of what I can profitably sell my cards for, then that card is no use for that business. Now, it may mean that it turns out easier to get the cards printed somewhere else, more profitable. So a business is one thing, but you really do have to decide what matters when you're doing your printing. I use things like test images. I produce profiles. I do all kinds of stuff to try and make sure that the print quality I get is at the level I want. It's up to you to decide what you want, how much money you want to spend, how much you're going to spend ongoing. Now, I can give some advice on that, on print costs, but it is always easier to use a better printer. Now, if you want to see an example of some of the trade-offs, have a look at a video I made, for example, comparing the Epson ET8550, which is an ink tank printer, so ink costs are considerably lower, with the P700, which is a high quality printer. So you've got two different printers there, different approaches, different results. Likewise, Canon, I did a video looking at some of their cheaper printers versus, say, a P200. Now, the P200 is an excellent printer, dye-based printer. I really like it. I produce some really nice looking prints from it, but it has relatively small ink cartridges. Now, if that's too expensive for you, you're going to look at one of the cheaper printers, has maybe ink tanks, but has really poor colour management, so it takes a lot of effort to get good quality results. Now, the more expensive printers are easier to use to get good results. But there's one thing I'll finish off on that you really do need to remember, and I'm continually reminded of this every time I test a new printer, use a different printer. It may be easier to produce good results from a better quality printer, but better printers need skill and higher quality images to produce those better results. So, and I've looked at this before, do you need a new printer? Just because you buy a new printer doesn't mean your print quality is suddenly going to be vastly better. Something to bear in mind, that the biggest limitation on print quality for most people is not the printer, it's not the ink, it's their skill levels and actual knowledge, and their photography skills as well, photo editing skills. So if you're looking at buying a new printer, think about that carefully. But always remember, go back to the quality triangle, decide, is it print cost that's important to you? Is it quality that's important to you? Or it is the initial cost of the printer that's important. I hope that's been of some use. Hope it makes sense. Please do ask questions. And I appreciate that there are going to be printers which are outliers to this. Some are better, some are not so good than others. But have a think about it if you're actually looking to buy yourself a printer to do some printing, and what sorts of media you use. Thanks.